Life must be hard for a Japanese Logan Paul fan.
Father, when I grow up, I want to be like Logan Paul.
You bring dishonor to our family!
No son of mine will ever scam people. Get these notions out of your head, or he will find you in the forest.
Now, the host of any podcast is really important, so let's run down through a quick history of Logan Paul. After being inspired by the ethics of the Chinese, Logan Paul came to the conclusion: children are exploitable. Show them videos of lassoing women in public, tasing dead animals, faking your death, disrespecting other cultures, and maybe show them a dead body. Children, being children, will not only forgive you, in their eyes, you didn't even do anything wrong. Cover up any controversy with a public stunt. Did you just show children a dead body? Fight KSI. Then once people think you've changed, realize burglary gets you 2 years in jail, but scamming people for hundreds of thousands of dollars gets you effectively zero punishment. Scam them with crypto pump and dumps. List includes Ding Doink and Elon Coin. Tell your fans people only criticize you for views and money. And thank the gods of YouTube that children don't have extensions that show your dislike bar. Get away with it, then do an NFT scam called cryptozoo, your biggest scam yet. Tell people, oopsie doopsie, I'll pay you back ASAP. While in court, you're laying out a defense why you don't have to pay them back. Then become a big stakeholder in an energy drink where you lie about how effective it is while pushing a 200 milligram caffeine drink onto 5-year-olds. Sadly, doctors disapprove. Tim Dillon made a book, How Boomers Destroyed the World, but first, a child. That's because parents allowed Logan Paul to raise their children instead. Now, their guest list is really good. They have David Blaine, Bear Grylls, Ryan Garcia, Kevin Hart. But here's the secret to podcasting that they don't want you to know. Having a guest who's a master of their field, who has a unique, inspiring life, just carries the entire podcast. Like in League of Legends talk, Logan Paul is effectively a bronze player asking a diamond League of Legends player to break their backs carrying the podcast. And as for his conversation style, it involves interrogation. A lot of questions.
Are you trying to be the daredevil that your dad was? Man, you've been on so many adventures. Climb Mount Everest when you were 23 years old. Man vs. Wild, one of my favorite shows growing up. Do you know that you're going to sleep in a sheep's carcass before you do it?
Did you watch MacGyver as a kid?
What would be 5 items that you would bring?
Did you have any thoughts on that event and what happened there?
This might come off a little bit nitpicky, but the difference between a conversation that is going through statements and not questions is massive. Unpopular opinion, like any podcast that pre-plans their conversation isn't a conversation, so isn't a podcast. It's a show or an interview. And often you'll find Logan looking at his laptop during the podcast. It's bad enough when a friend goes on their phone. Try a laptop. But you can kind of imagine that most guests who go on there are only going on there for exposure. Like seeing Logan Paul, that's a price you pay. Now, Logan Paul often is accused by his viewers for being a little bit of a hypocrite, especially regarding the Andrew Tate situation, where he of all people supported the deplatforming. And you can kind of tell with Logan Paul's history that he should be one to support a second chance and to support not deplatforming people. Now, I'm not covering Andrew Tate, that would be just this long video. And right now, I am milking Logan Paul. My main point is just that Logan isn't exactly the best at expressing his views. Don't get me wrong, occasionally he's actually quite good, but other times not so much when the topic's a little decisive, and you might notice.
You are not fiercely on the side of the woman on this one. I don't give a what you say unless you have a uterus, like, just back away.
You're involved politically a little bit. You follow politics. Why are men involved in this decision making like at all?
Now, there are multiple ways to look at the abortion debate. Most people agree that there's a form of life at conception. People just tend to vary with the value they give it over time. And to make it more difficult, there really are good answers that lay on all sides. Hence why it's just such a grey, decisive area. And men and women are allowed to make laws on it, seeing as it all kind of premeditates on the value of the fetus. And that's just one argument against it. I want to keep this video short. But my stance is I think you really should be allowed to have an abortion up to 3 months, because at that point you kind of know if it's physically disabled, so you can kill it.
The reason why men are involved is because a subset of this group still believes in the sanctity of church and state having some sort of intimate relationship.
So weird.
But
it's
stop.
so
But
weird.
that
It's
is where
2022.
Now, a lot of pro-lifers don't do it because of God. Their argument is basically this joke.
It's not a baby yet. That's what they say, which may or may not be true. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I'll tell you, my gut tells me that doesn't make sense. It's not a baby yet. That would be like if I was making a cake and I poured some batter in a pan and I put it in the oven, and then 5 minutes later you came by and you grabbed the pan, you threw it across the floor, and I went, what the fuck, you just ruined my birthday cake? And then you were like, well, that wasn't a cake yet. It's like, well, it would have been. If you didn't do what you just did, there would have been a cake in 50 minutes. Something happened to that cake, you cake murdering son of a...
I just think both sides get really poorly represented, and Logan Paul's views always seemingly side with the side that, you know, is cancelling people. It's like, see, I'm with you guys. It just doesn't seem very authentic, and when he's talking about stuff, it seems a little bit acted out.
So
May I
weird.
say one thing?
It is so weird. Oh my God, I can't. My head fucking explodes. I cannot comprehend how silly and archaic some of our country's values are.
Yes.
Oh my God, it boggles my mind. I am, as all of you know, I function highly based on logic and reason, and I'm not always super emotional. And
I think there's someone hanging right there.
And that's kind of all he does throughout the clip. I don't mind the opinion on whatever side you want to have it on, but similar to a maths teacher, I want it broken down. I don't want the answer, I want to know how you got to the answer. Now let's look at the dynamics of the podcast. The co-host Mike is often praised when he's not actually on the podcast. Now we did have a third host, Mac, who was an artist, but he continuously got belittled for his passion.
Putting your fingerprints down.
a lot of fingerprints.
I recommend it. Logan, you said anyone could do that. What do you think? You still think someone could do that after I finished?
I think a baby could do it.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. I want to see you do it then.
Why would I do that?
If you think anyone can do it, I'd love to see you step up to the challenge.
Why?
Because I'm interested, man. I think if
But
you
I'm
really
not.
think
Don't
anyone
you think
could do
I
that,
should be interested in it if I wanted to do it?
it would help.
Oh, and by the way, Logan called him a childhood friend.
And if you don't know, Max has been my best friend since I was 6 years old. We raced in the playground. I beat him, and ever since then, we became best friends.
But they're not about 24-hour paintings.
Well, because the podcast isn't about 24-hour paintings. The podcast is about conversation, open
I
dialogue.
had
You
stuff
have,
about-
you have topics. You
I
have
had
material.
stuff about us missing the market pop because, 2020 was a good year for the market, and Portnoy's been giving us a bunch of great looks, and we sat on the sidelines. People are mad at Adele for the braids.
Now yeah, there is absolutely no conversation that can be had about art. One of the most vast topics you actually have. Oh yeah, let's talk about Adele getting backlash for braids. Which if you talked about art, you could say a huge part of art is being inspired by one culture and then maybe merging it with your own cultural art to combine it. That's how you got Nightcore. And as an artist, you'd be hard to find one that would want their art to be restricted. And it's kind of crazy how someone who's created nothing, to take that individual's credit to then become the gatekeeper of who's allowed to access this art. Because in a way, a haircut is an art. I don't know. I just feel as though cultural appropriation is a power trip that has no consideration to why the art was made. And so I think it's a perfect conversation to actually have with an artist. But feel free to watch that. The whole comment section just kind of says it all. Yeah, believe it or not, Logan is not really a great friend. Now take George, who usually actually, you might not believe it if you're not deep into it, he actually gets a lot of positive reviews throughout even the episodes a year ago. Oh, like the more I did research, the more compliments I just found of being like, oh, he's funny, he's this, he's that. And it's kind of sad that his entire reputation is just overshadowed by this horrible bit of drama in his life. Now, as a third host, you're forced to sit there and occasionally make a good comment. It's a little demeaning. There's no obvious you are living in the shadow of a podcast position. And because George was getting continuously stepped on,
That really hurt me is you told me I need a therapist because I believe in Jesus. That one hurt me.
No, I didn't. I said you need a therapist because Jesus isn't quite doing it for you.
What do I need a therapist for then?
Jesus isn't doing it for you. And I
what do I need
believe
a therapist for?
I don't believe you're as emotionally mature as you could be.
What do I need a therapist for?
To get you to level up
In what?
yourself.
In what category?
Emotional intelligence.
Emotional. Me.
Yes.
I think there's someone hanging right there.
Is that another crypto coin scam? Of course, his sort of mindset became a bit more defensive and his ego got a bit more fragile because although people are cheering him on, you have a lot of people in his friendship group who are kind of belittling him all the time. And then Bobby Lee came on, made a few jokes, which just released the cap on the bottle, and he just got tired of being stepped on. I know George does typically get a lot of shots taken at him for this, but if you kind of take the whole picture into account, you do end up siding with George as you kind of understand him. You're like, oh, wait a minute. It's not that he's typically soft-skinned. He's just he's just in a really toxic environment. And take Joe Rogan, right? He's helped his friends make their own podcast. He has this whole community that supports one another. If you know one of them, you probably know the other bunch. But Logan, in his famine, competitive mindset, goes, if you make a podcast, that hurts me. Even though it doesn't, that false belief is all he needs to attack his friend. So yeah, the dynamic is toxic to say the least. And clearly Logan Paul, I mean, look, he might have friends, but I feel as though it's just the label, and then if you looked at it authentically, it's not actually the real thing. It's a lot of fake friends with just a small little push will just turn on one another. Let's be real. But I'll leave it there. This podcast is really just a worse version of Andrew Schultz's podcast, which is actually good. It has comedians on it and a great friendship group that typically gets along. And even though Logan Paul's podcast might have a few good episodes, I mean, overall, but it's not as good as it should be for how large it is, and I just think I can't look past the entire history of a person like that. Anyway, like, subscribe, check out the other episodes, and subscribing means you're more likely to see me roast the next guy, or you can check out the old people I've roasted. Up to you.